Good evening and welcome to the 313 Symposium, once again with myself, Thomas Sheridan, and Jason Roba over there in the North Pacific Northwest of the USA. Tonight we have a man who's I've been dealing with for, maybe over a decade. It's practically family at this point. And it's a man whose radio station or radio program, Legalise Freedom, is one of the benchmarks of alternative listening. It's absolutely an archived treasure trove of alternative thinking, and very well done and put together over the last, it must be 12 years you've been doing, 11, 12 years. And there's certain people on there that have just been delivered colossal interviews. There was an amazing one recently with John Waters, but I can remember once Rupert Sheldrake, and I've been on the show loads of times, and I always enjoy talking to this man, Greg Moffitt. Now, the reason why I wanted Greg Moffitt on the show is two things. He's a repository in many ways of all this knowledge that he's pulled in over the years on his program. So it'd be good for us, the listeners, to talk about various subjects. But also in recent months, he's been kind of coming out of the shadows, and he's been making vlogs. Like so many of us during the Rona lockdown, there was a kind of a transformation in our own consciousness went on. And he came out first talking about the music business. Now, he was the keyboard player Damien in the metal goth band Cradle of Filth, and made 2 albums with them, 2 good albums as well. And he left it. He was kind of jumped into music and then jumped out again and worked as a music journalist. And then he did Legalise Freedom after that. And like I said, it's an enormous repository of information. If you haven't joined it and subscribed to the subscription, is an absolute bargain considering what you get there on top of the regular free broadcasts. So welcome, Greg Moffitt. I'm delighted to have you on here, and I hope you're well.
Thanks, Thomas, for everything you've just said. I'm very grateful. And I feel like we've had a symbiotic relationship with regards to podcasting and whatnot over the years. Yeah. You've given a lot to me personally through your writings and your broadcasting as well. And if there's a day when you don't make a video sitting in your car, I kind of feel like, oh shit, he hasn't done one today. I feel like something's missing.
Well, thanks for the pressure. But sometimes I have nothing to say. You know how it is. But nothing happens. First question: is human consciousness going through a spin cycle at the moment?
I feel like it is, but it also feels easy to say like it is. I mean, you could say, hasn't it always been doing that? Isn't that what incarnating on this earth as a human is? A spin cycle, in consciousness. And I remember when the year 2000 was approaching, people were, there was all this millennial fear and, talk about, what's going to happen. And I remember having read about what happened in the lead up to the year 1000, and there was the same kind of stuff. And I thought, well, isn't this just a regular thing that happens? We always like to think of ourselves that we're living in a special time. And that clearly seems to be a thing, that seems to be the case. But and when 9/11 happened, I certainly 2012 was just a non-event. But when 9/11 came around, I felt like that was an epochal event. This was something that really, really significant in human history. But then that kind of went away, and it didn't. The waves from that still rippled out. We're still living with some of the significance of 9/11 today. Actually, you mentioned I'd done some vlogs. My vlog, as I prefer to call it, 9/11, COVID 9/11, a warning from history, kind of addresses this. But everything we've been living through with the pandemic, and I apologize to those who are tired of this to go to that so soon, but everything we've been living with the last 18 months or so has really made it feel, just as you say, spin cycle for human consciousness. Something is happening, and it isn't, as to paraphrase John Waters, you mentioned my interview with him, to paraphrase him, it isn't just about a head cold. Something else is going on here, and I don't yet know what it is. Like you, I'm still trying to figure it out. And you're actually at the leading age, I think, of trying to reach for this, to grasp it, what it is.
Yeah. I really don't know either. I fly all over the place every day of the week, but I do absolutely concur with yourself, and Jason feels the same way too. John Waters also, is that yes, there's something else, and it's not just the Great Reset or anything like that, because they could do that tomorrow if they wanted. The bank's well and they have us well and truly by the short and curlies. They could do it tomorrow if they really wanted that. It's something more, and it's something they're not able to control. And there are often times when I see glimpses of fear in their eyes or in their behavior, as if they themselves are confused. Perhaps like things like you doing all your work and interviewing the people you work, and me and Jason and all the other people making films and all the things we do, is probably the kind of, I don't know, the precursor for what's coming. We were almost like in boot camp, and and I think that's why we're handling it better than others. And although it's affecting us, of course, but do you feel that you spoke about when you were a teenager, you went to see, I know you grew up in Limavady, right, in Northern Ireland, and you went to see Saxon at the heavy metal band Saxon at a festival in Derry or something like that, and you said it was like one of those step into consciousness moments. Do you think that was the beginning of where you are now, in not just in terms of music, but the kind of things you're interested in, that you were awakened, like in that Jungian sense, you stepped into yourself?
I don't know. It certainly was with music. For the rest of it, I don't think it was. Interestingly, you'll appreciate this, Thomas. I'm not sure if Jason will, but I actually spent the first 6 or 7 years of my life in Ballymena. That's where I actually grew up, and then moved to Castle Rock in County Derry, and then to Limavady. But the local MP this is not answering your question at all, but I don't care.
Go ahead. I know where this is going. It's Ian Paisley, right?
Oh yeah, I think I probably told you about this. Never. So we had him in our kitchen once for a cup of tea in the 70s. But yeah, so not for the subject of the awakening of consciousness, but certainly awakening to music. Yeah, that event was pivotal. That was my first concert, and I think everybody, like your first girlfriend, your first kiss, your first taste of alcohol, or all these initiatory rites. Your first concert is very significant. So yeah, it was at Templemore Sports Complex. To call it a sports complex is really over egging it, but it was in Derry. I don't even remember where in the city it is, or if it still exists. But yeah, that was just the first time to hear live music. Maybe a year and a half after I decided that heavy metal was the thing for me. To have just the volume, and I mentioned to you in emails that I've still got some pain in my right ear if live music goes over a certain decibel level, because at that concert, the band had some pyro, and when it went bang, I could feel it. My right ear went bang, and to this day, it's a thing. It doesn't trouble me much, but if bands are too loud, which is a bit of a oxymoron when you're talking about heavy metal, if the bands are too loud, then that the pain is still there. But yeah, that was a threshold moment, no doubt about it.
Greg, on the subject of firsts and everything, I wanted to go back and say too that when Thomas and I came onto your show back in I think it was May or June, that was my first time ever going on a radio show with someone, and I was shitting bricks for a little bit of time, the days and weeks leading up to that. So nervous, like shit. Here I'm going on to Greg Moffitt's show with Legalise Freedom with Thomas Sheridan, the man Thomas Sheridan, about a film we just made together, and that was one of those experiences where I'm like, well, this is starting to happen. And then from that, Thomas and I started doing this symposium together, and I really got a real taste for liking doing these this type of interview with people coming on shows. And so it was just a real big inspiration to have done that show with you, and then to have gone on with Thomas and start doing this together. And this first kind of thing, right? In March, April, May, I had no desire to ever go onto the internet in front of a camera and a microphone with Thomas and guests here and start doing this kind of thing. But growing up, I always really enjoyed listening to Coast AM with Art Bell, and then again with George Norrie, and your stuff and Red Ice Radio back in the day before they got weird, and some of these other shows. I always really enjoyed this. So now it's like I found this thing, and I just kind of wanted to, I know. It's weird. They were good, 10 years ago, I'd say, but it was just, shit got weird, and they had their Doctor Strangelove moment. But so with that, I wanted to thank you for that, and then just kind of ask you a question too. It's like you're such a good speaker, and I find myself tripping over my own words in these interviews and writing out here in my little spiral journal before the shows my notes and stuff, and then forgetting all of that. What do you do, Greg, or what did you do in the beginning for preparation if you've got a guest like Thomas or someone on your show? Do you go through and read some of their material a week out or a month out, or are you at the point now where you can just draw from your own experience and sit down, and be prepared to go on air? I just kind of wanted to ask you about your process, if that's cool.
Well, natural gobshites like me and Thomas can just go, like it's just, wind us up and let us go. But, of course you do serious preparation, but you try to make it look like you haven't or sound like you haven't. That's kind of the trick, I've done some production work. I know David Icke is a super controversial subject, but when he did that People's Voice thing, which you may not be aware of, Jason, but Thomas will remember, and that was very problematic, but I did some sort of green room production stuff there with his son, Gareth. Basically, he was doing presenting, and I was making sure he knew everything he needed to know before he went on air. So there's that kind of process. You want to go on whatever your medium is, radio, television. You want to go on there. It looks like you know what you're talking about, but without having made too much effort. So effortless, So, and my stuff isn't live. Legalise Freedom stuff's pre-recorded. So I have maximum respect for people who go on live radio and television, even mainstream media shills who go on on the BBC or whatever. If they can go on there and make it look slick, that's a talent in itself. But yeah, a lot of effort goes in before I open my mouth. And with Thomas, for example, the very first interview I had with him around his second book, I read the whole thing and made copious notes and had talking points arranged beforehand, just so that my mind didn't go blank, basically. So I appreciate the journey that you're on, Jason. And it gets easier.
Yeah,
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I think also your brain becomes like a big sponge, and your conversational skills become better in terms of dealing with guests. That's what I discovered anyway. You've always got you've got anecdotes that you can, if the conversation starts drying up, you've got anecdotes from your past experience that you can jump that in and suddenly pop it into the conversation. Now, I know you then, after your heavy metal indoctrination, you started a fanzine, a metal fanzine. You went to England to go to do university or college, and then you worked in the music industry proper as a journalist, right? Is that right? Or did you go to a band first?
No, you got it correct. I did the fanzine because I was so enthusiastic about music. Yeah. And this is why the Legalise Freedom thing started. I was really passionate about something. I wanted to tell other people about it. So I did some kind of media thing so other people could access it. So yeah, I went to university, and then I'd already started doing a few articles, music biz articles for Money. And then when I finished university, I went into that full time. Then became a professional musician for 3 years, and then went back to the professional music writing thing for a long time. And that's only recently ended, actually.
For everybody, like writing in general is gone. It's like I constantly think about writing another book, but the amount of effort I'll put into it, I won't get anything back. Just that no one buys books anymore. Even Kindle. So it's like it's better. I think it's much more rewarding and immediate with the video thing now. But yeah, I mean, this is a story of our time. So who are you writing for? Like Metal Hammer and Kerrang and things like that?
I've written for all the biggies: Metal Hammer, Kerrang, classic rock, prog, which is a magazine that's still going, doing very well, actually. And I've written for magazines overseas, it's like syndicated stuff. Terrorizer magazine was my baby. That's no longer a thing. But I was deputy editor there for 10 years. and that was that. You know, that was my full-time thing. I was really passionate about that magazine because it was so across the board, you know, so open-minded and broad. Compared, it wasn't just metal; it was extreme music. You know, she'd have a band like one of my favorite bands of all time, Swans. You know, we'd have them.
I'm a big fan of Swans. Yeah.
Yeah, we'd have them, or we could have like you know, Einstürzende Neubauten, you know, just industrial stuff and some hard electronic stuff. You know, we just encompass a little bit more than a regular magazine.
Well, Kerrang became more open-minded after a while. I remember seeing they started to sneak bands like Skinny Puppy and bands like that in. So they sort of like became less metal as well. I think the metal thing broadened anyway, you know, it became into a bigger thing. So, you know, the Cradle of Filth thing, this is an interesting thing. I just find it so interesting that, you got the dream that so many people want to join a rock band that had already been established. You were touring the world you had a small time as a rock star, and you made 2 albums, and they're probably their 2 best albums as well. And then you just left. Like that to me is a fascinating story that I don't think you've ever really spoken about. I haven't heard it anyway. Like in and out of Cradle of Filth, how did that happen?
Well, I have spoken about it actually because a few people who've done, who are doing the equivalent of what you do and the equivalent of what I do with Legalise Freedom, they're doing with like metal. You know, podcast series have interviewed me, done historical interviews. When this eventually gets published, I'll link to the interviews in the comments if people are interested. But as far as leaving Cradle of Filth goes, how shall I put it? I was invited to leave. It was one of those situations. But joining it was, you're absolutely right. It's not something I ever made any effort to do. And that might sound like slightly annoying to some people, you know, because some people go through most of their lives striving to be a success in rock and roll. You know, they want to be in a band that releases an album that people take notice of, and maybe they'd like to make a living doing it. And almost no one ever gets to do that. And I kind of fell into it almost by accident. But, you know, it is what it is. It was not long after I left university, about a year after that. So it was 1995. And I bought a copy of the latest issue of Metal Hammer magazine, which was a big thing here in the UK. There's various editions published around the world, in Spain and Australia, but this was the British edition. And I was sat living where I do now, and I was sat on the fountain in the city centre, and it was a nice warm summer day. And I read the whole thing right through the classifieds, and in the classifieds, there was this little ad that said "name band." You know, so for those who don't know, that means a band who are established, require keyboard player. And a few years earlier, I'd started playing keyboards, inspired by my love of 1970s synth music, like Tangerine Dream, Klaus Schulze, stuff like that. And Jason gets this. You know, you check out Jason's work, you'll see why we've got this in common. And for some reason, I thought I'm going to apply for that. It was just like, why? But I didn't have anything particularly going on at that time. I was kind of, I just left university. I had enough money in the bank to not need a job. And so I wrote a letter, as we did back then, and put a cassette into the package with me noodling on keyboards, sent it off, and I got a reply about a week later saying, come down to Suffolk, which is where the band were based. And we'd like you to try out. And I did that, came back up north, and a few days later, I got a phone call saying, you're in.
So that must have been amazing, really. You know, now you're a rock star, you know, out of nowhere. You know, it must have been incredible.
Well, I didn't really think about it in those terms, but that's effectively what it was. And it was a hell of a ride. You know, there was a certain amount of unpleasantness and ugliness, and the band was riven by arguments and division. It's probably still is, but all the way through that time. But I look back on it so fondly because it was just like jumping in like a hyperspace, jumping into another reality just for 3 years. of like stuff that most people, it's the stuff that fiction is made of, like films, like, and then, bear in mind, this is relatively small scale. We got to the point after about a year I was in the band, we got to the point where we earned a full-time living from it, but it wasn't, we weren't making millions or anything like that. But it was still all the cliches, all the glorious cliches were there, that drugs and groupies and like everything, all those things in Spinal Tap. This is Spinal Tap, the film, that all started to make sense. Is that I was ticking them all off week after week, like getting lost backstage,
But it was, I'm sure, it was a phenomenal experience, even with the bad taste it left in your mouth.
Yeah, from an artistic point of view, I have regret around it because the music that was made at that time, it was, some of it was so transcendent, and fans to this day just say, "Oh my God, this has really just changed my life." And I just wish that there could have been more of that. And I wish that there didn't have to be the infighting and bickering and small-mindedness, and that we could have realized that we were part of something bigger. But I was the oldest person in the band at that time. So everybody was in their early to mid-20s. And I guess, everybody who was part of that has learned from life since then. But being part of that, I just wish there could have been more of it. There was so much potential, and the band is still going today successfully. Yeah. But I would like to have continued to create on that level, if it had been possible. But it clearly wasn't meant to be.
And you never thought about joining another band or starting a band afterwards or anything like that?
There was actually, I almost joined another metal band called My Dying Bride. And that was actually much more my thing musically, despite what I've just said. I mean, the music I made with Cradle was like, I'm very proud of. But this metal band from Yorkshire, who again are still going to this day, they at one point, it was 1999, they were coming back from some difficulties they'd had, and they were looking for a keyboard player. And I went over and had a dialogue with them about joining. That didn't happen, obviously, but it nearly happened, and that would have been possibly an even more productive phase for music for me if that had gone ahead, because I absolutely love their music. It's really sits with me really well. Their music touches me at a very deep level, and but the guys in the band are just I know them quite well and get on very well with, and they've got that Yorkshire sense of humor, sort of thing, really, really dry. And so, yeah, that almost happened, but it didn't.
So back into music journalism, and then I'm assuming that went along like a good job. And then was it 9/11 that something changed? Was it a major moment or something, and switching towards alternative things?
Yeah, I mean, it took a while for it to kick in, but like I think for a lot of people, 9/11 was a consciousness shift. Yeah. We're trying to process what had happened and what it meant and what was really behind it. And I think it was probably it was 2011 by the time I started Legalise Freedom. So it took a few years, but certainly 9/11 had me thinking about what am I doing with my life, And I think a lot of people are finding that now with the pandemic, Yeah. What are my priorities? What do I want to achieve while I'm alive? And so, yeah, 9/11 was definitely a trigger. It was more like a slap around the face, like a wake up moment. It's not like I was asleep beforehand, but it kind of stepped it up a little bit. Because going right back to the 80s, I was reading, I've been on the journey that I'm still on, started back then, reading, occult and esoteric material, Arthur C. Clarke, his Strange World sort of TV shows. I was interested in everything 14, the group that we have, Beyond Room 313, all of that stuff kicked in my early teens. I'd already been there when I was a child. I was obsessed with like dinosaurs, as a lot of little boys are. And but that was a kind of a metaphor for what happened in the past, all that time beyond, like Graham Hancock stuff that we can't see, that we don't know what happened. What happened? Where did we come from? Why are we here? Where did humans really? Are we really from the apes? All that sort of stuff. But yeah, so I would say that 9/11 began a process that culminated in 2011, where I thought, I've got to do something about this. Because I remember my girlfriend at the time, I was reading all these very interesting books, including stuff, by Graham Hancock. And I was going into her workshop where she was doing her crafts and sort of saying, oh, wow, I've just been reading about this. And at some point she said, this is very interesting and I like hearing about it, but why don't you put it out there? And that's why I thought, okay, I'll start a blog. And then I realized that although I'm a writer, I actually find the writing process quite difficult. I like when the writing's done, but I don't like doing it. So hence I thought, well, just do what you're doing with your poor girlfriend, just talk.
Yeah. And go ahead, Jason.
Oh, I was going to say, just isn't it so interesting too? Like we went from the talking about music into, your career in music, and then going into 9/11. I just always find it so fascinating that so many of us in this field started off or began with music, and these topics just being there from our childhood, our adolescent years. And it's just kind of like, Thomas, we were talking about the path of the bard. It's like, there's these different pillars that we rest on. And, one of the strongest pillars there is music, I would say, whether it's Thomas, yourself, or me, or, we were even going to have Lon Milo Duquette on yesterday, and him being such an incredible musician, orator, and occultist. And it's just like so many of these people, either began as musicians or are currently musicians. And then, like you're saying, Greg, end up finding a way to, these things that we all bug our friends and significant others about. We talk to them all the time, and they sometimes say, yeah, how about you go on the camera and start talking to other people about that? Or how about you write a book about that or something? And it's kind of this social archetype that we all, have such a similar background. And then also a love for synthesizers and stuff, of course.
Well, let me tell you something. I dipped my toes into the music thing for a while there when I lived in New York when I was in my early 20s. And it was a pretty hardcore sort of like industrial kind of goth scene that I was in there for a few years. And when I think back now, I would say about when we weren't doing music or talking about films or something, I would say a sizable amount of our conversations were about conspiracy theory. It was not a whacked out thing back then. It was we used to talk about the Lee Harvey Oswald thing. We talk about like things like that, we talk about them there was nothing, it wasn't considered a fruitcake thing. It was considered like historical what if or something like that. It was just a line the discussion. We talk about ghosts. One of the girls we knew, she lived in an apartment building that Blondie and Chris Stein had lived in Lower Manhattan, and she had seen a ghost of a boy and a girl running around the apartment building dressed in Victorian clothes. And turns out that Blondie, the whole band, had seen this ghost these two ghosts, and they were killed in a fire. So we used to talk about this stuff all the time, non-stop, the conspiracy thing. And it was not considered a freaky thing. It was not considered something that idiots did. In fact, it was quite the opposite. You were generally intelligent people having these conversations. That's my experience anyway. And then that X-Files TV series came along, which is a fun TV show, and it's great fun to watch. It's great acting and everything. But I think that was deliberately engineered by the CIA or someone. And we do know Chris Carter was involved with the CIA. He's admitted that now, to make it look like anyone interested in alternative topics was a bit of a nut job. I really do believe that was specifically engineered in the run-up perhaps to 9/11. Now, Greg, a question I wanted to ask you, and it's happened to me a few times since I've started doing this. Over the years, was there ever a moment where you were interviewing a guest and they came up with a revelation or something, or a new idea was popped into your head where you went, oh my God, I never thought, that's incredible. Like a moment of like, this is why I'm doing it. Has that ever happened to you?
It has, but disappointingly, I'm not going to be able to tell you who or when.
I I understand. I wasn't going to do the same either, but it's a remarkable feeling, isn't it?
It is. It really is. It's just a step change in your life. It's just, the parallel I can draw is with some of the things I mentioned earlier about things that do move you on in your existence. Tomorrow is not going to be like today. So I mentioned 9/11 earlier on. The day after that was not like the day before. So I've had that with guests. Certainly, you're one of them. Anthony Peake is one of them, and there's been quite a few others who have just shared some insight that I've been thinking about that night, falling asleep, and just, my life cannot be quite the same as it was before. And I think that's why we're here, trying to, well, that's what I feel anyway, trying to unravel reality. What is this thing? What is going on? And that's why I felt compelled to do this in the first place, to talk to, these people whose books I was reading. I felt compelled to reach out to them and have a conversation with them because I needed to,
Yeah. What answers have you got, if any? Like, can you say, I now know this about something, or I now know that about something, or I now have a clearer understanding of a particular thing that I didn't have before?
The most, and it was something that I intuited, back in the 80s, but I couldn't articulate it. But the most powerful insight, really, I guess I've had is best encapsulated in the work of my regular radio guest, Bernardo Kastrup. And that is that consciousness is fundamental to reality. Basically, it's called, in terms of metaphysics, it's called idealism. Yeah. And that is the thing that keeps me going. I've been going through a difficult time recently, and the thing that keeps me going is this isn't all there is. Yeah. Before your life began and after your life ends on this physical plane, there is not a black void of nothingness. There seems to be a fucking massive expanse of a lot more. And we don't know what it is, maybe that we're not meant to know. This, as I was talking with my most recent interview with John Michael Greer, this physical plane that we're on now is a place of hard limits and struggle and pain. And we're here for that reason, to experience this, but that's not all there is.
No, I really totally believe that myself. That's probably been my greatest personal understanding of all the years I've been looking into all this stuff as well, that this is basically, it's not all that it seems. And even things like, there's a tremendous poetry to existence, I find. You look at bad things that happen in your life. Okay, at the time you're going through them and people say, oh, this will be fine, you'll laugh at this one day, you want to punch them or something. But when it's all over and when it's all done, you do see there was a poetic unfoldment that did bring you to that point. And it's quite remarkable. And then you go back and analyze, as if you think to yourself, did I initiate this at subconscious level before it actually happened? So I would willingly have this experience. Well, subconsciously willingly have this experience.
Yeah, I had a few years ago, I went for a hypnosis session, a sort of past life regression thing. And I came away from that feeling that, I chose to come here. That's a bit of a cliche. Like, for those of you who are familiar with the works of Dolores Cannon, we incarnated here for a reason. We're here to, whether voluntarily or not, but we're here to learn lessons, to process things. And that's my understanding, and that's my take on what we're experiencing.
Yeah, the way I would describe it is that, the way you have your flesh and blood body, and people seek to have psychedelic experiences through entheogens or whatever. Well, I think this body that we're having and this experience we're having in the material world is our psychedelic experience coming back from the other direction, experience this kind of flesh and blood thing. I think there's really a symbiotic relationship between the two. What, we'll never know. I mean, the philosophers and the mystics and the swamis can talk about that one forever. But I've no doubt about this either. I'm, especially now as I'm not getting any younger. I'm starting to look back on my life, and and you'll probably feel the same way too. That you say, like, well, that actually happened because it was meant to happen. Because if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have done this, and I wouldn't have got there, and I wouldn't have met this person, or I wouldn't have found myself in this position. And I can honestly say that some of the things that have happened to me that have been very bad have actually resulted in things that were incredible as a result of it. It's the strangest thing. There's almost like a recoil, you know, when you pull a bow and an arrow and it swings back. It was almost like that. It was like but I do think there's a self analysis involved. If you sit there saying, "Oh, the world is crap, everything is shite, my life is shit," it never gets better. But if you actually, I mean, I'm a firm believer in the whole Jungian Joseph Campbell thing of the hero's journey, that if you put yourself into a kind of an archetypal mythological view of your own existence, my God, the rewards come to you, regardless of the level of shit you get.
I really like what you both said there. Just real quick, that it's something that can't necessarily be known objectively, but the pursuit of looking in that direction is really what matters. You know, there's a lot of people out there who claim to have all the answers about things, but it's those of us who are continuously looking into that otherness that exists there outside of the physical reality, and looking for some sort of answer, and being on that path really seems to be what matters most. So in the end, you know, we might not know all the answers to what happened with 9/11 or with COVID, but you know, or anything like that, but it's the pursuit of that brings about some real fulfillment in life.
Yeah, from a word to another word, and from a deed to another deed, you know, everything's a chain of causality. And you're right, Thomas. You talk about things that have happened to you in the past that you view as negative, but that's what brings you to where you are now, and that's really, really, really important. And I didn't maybe have that in mind earlier in life, you know, but you learn this, you know, you see how one thing that cannot happen without the other. And that might sound a bit nebulous, but that's the best way I can put it.
And I do believe with this thing, with the Rona and the lockdown and all the bullshit that's going on now, I really do believe that this is the test that we've all been manifested and brought together for. I really honestly do believe that. And it's like, and I know we're going to get through it. I know it may sound naive, but I can remember, like, even Joseph Campbell was a middle distance runner when he was in college, in university. I think he did 1,500 meters or something. But he said that he knew he was going to win a race before it would happen. Before the starting pistol went off, he knew the race he was going to win it or come second or third. He just knew it. And I remember that the Italian soccer player Roberto Baggio, who was also a Buddhist back in the early 1990s, he said the same, that he could always tell what the game was going to win or lose before they even went to the stadium. And I think if you put yourself enough into this kind of process of consciously referring to yourself and using things like the tarot and dream journals or whatever, you do actually develop a sense of where this thing is going. And I do honestly believe that we've been called to this moment in time, even this show, putting the show together this time. And a lot of us are going through difficult things in our lives right now. But we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't think we were going to win. You know, and that's, when I say win, I mean a positive outcome. I really do believe that. And I'm not just saying that because, you know, I'm trying to build people's emotions up, but I really do believe that there's a phenomenal event happening here that is seismic in terms of human consciousness, and humanity is splitting in two. And there's a transhumanist world for the normies who want that, but I do believe that there's another kind of world possible, and we will see the fruits of our knowledge into things like the quantum world that we've gotten from Anthony Peake and all the other people you've mentioned. I really, you know, right back to Michael Tolman's Tolbus, The Holographic Universe. I mean, we all found these books at the same time. I really do believe that was almost like boot camp, and it was meant to happen when it did.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's powerful insights. I mean, Michael Talbot's book, I didn't discover at the time, but I discovered it, I think, when it was meant to happen.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was like a precursor for where we find ourselves now. And yeah, for anybody who hasn't read it, actually, Michael Talbot died way too young, didn't you? Really?
Yeah.
It would be astonishing to imagine what he might have gone on. Because there's such powerful insights in that book of his, the holographic universe. Be amazing to see what he would have contributed if he'd lived longer.
Well, he was like someone who went into the Max Planck Institute and wrote a layman's version of it. I suppose it's the same way I did opposing people. I looked through the AMA and studied serial killers and criminology for years, and then wrote a layman's person on what the hell to deal with psychopaths. He did the same thing with the quantum thing. I think very much so he did that. And yeah, it was weird how he died young, but what a legacy he left. I mean, because everyone, like, from Anthony Peake to David Icke, and even myself and yourself, always references work at that book, in particular.
Yeah, because there's clearly something else going on here, as we've mentioned several times, that we're trying to grasp. With regards to incarnating at this time, or the nature of world events at the moment and what they mean and why we're going through it. I mean, what's been happening in the news recently with the pandemic response in Australia and New Zealand. I mentioned those countries in particular because many years ago, I had an Australian girlfriend and spent quite a lot of time in that country. And a year or so ago, I spent quite a lot of time in New Zealand. And these were two places that I instantly warmed to. I just thought these wonderful countries, with I could see myself living in either of these places so easily. It would just be, particularly New Zealand, because it has an oceanic climate, which is the same as the British Isles. So rain and wind and stuff that we're all familiar with. But it's just so beautiful, and I don't recognize those places now at this current time. I really, really don't, and I don't recognize the spirit of the people. They're emblematic of this weird thing that's going on at the minute with this, as John Waters referred to, a head cold. They're emblematic of what's going on and what's going wrong and what we're trying to grasp.
Yeah, I don't recognize Ireland anymore either. I mean, I don't know. I don't recognize the people around here or anything anymore. Obviously a huge black magic hex has been put upon the human race by these controllers and people in charge. But again, it's a disturbing thing to see. I mean, I've never been to Australia. I've got a sister who lives out there, but I always look to Australia as kind of a place of independence, a land of opportunity, a land of, hey, screw you, and yet the way to see them cowering at the feet of awful bureaucrats like that idiot running Victoria is quite amazing to me.
Yeah, it's staggering. I can't imagine what it's like. When I read the stories about people being pepper sprayed by police and shot with rubber bullets in Melbourne, the first place I went to when I went to Australia, just a wonderful city, just everything about it was amazing, and it's unimaginable. It's like something, it really is the dystopian nightmares that I read about in fiction in the 1980s, 1984 and Brave New World and all the rest of it, just on steroids. It's like, but I'm still, as I kind of hinted at a few moments ago, I'm still telling myself that there's a reason for this, and that we're here in this time with these events for a purpose, and we just need to hold the line.
Yeah, that's how I feel as well. You can't have anything that catastrophic or seismic without it not having a meaning. You just can't. It's true. The profundity is too enormous. I mean, I see fellas around here that I thought were hard men, that I mean, like the guys down the local pub, and they're wearing a little like knitted mask with a little pansy design on it, and they're looking around in terror that someone's going to infect them with a head cold. But I mean, I've spoken this like yourself to people like John Waters and stuff. I don't want to go too deep into it, but it is important. It's like the alien abduction thing, like in terms of like say body invasion of the body snatchers. It's barely a metaphor for me at this point. It may not be what's happening, but it's just as plausible as a virus making everyone scared.
Now, I've had a conversation in the last few days, and the person concerned, when she hears this, she'll know what I'm talking about, who has had a big family break because she's due to visit family, have family visit, and they will not do that because she has not had the needlecraft. And I have seen in my life too, relationships break down because of this and go away because of this, but something else is happening. There's no question about it. I don't know what it is, but something else is happening. And I am sorry. I am sorry on behalf of myself. I'm sorry for the broken relationships and the heartbreak, but something else is going on here. I, for one, and you guys are the same, I cannot just let this go. No. I cannot just say that there's a virus. There obviously is. People are getting sick, but I cannot just say that is it and just put my head down and keep my mouth shut. I cannot do it.
Yeah.
The transformation, like before you, sorry, Jason, just want to say this quickly. A woman I used to work with, she was one of the English crusty hippies that came to Ireland during the Thatcher years. They went on the road when Thatcher was in power, and loads of them ended up in Ireland, living in caravans and stuff. And she's been here ever since. She was the stereotypical hippie, an anti-vaxxer, and when I wasn't, and all this kind of thing, natural medicine, head twitch, you name the whole thing, right? Today, she shared a picture on Facebook of a chandelier made by a nurse in America that was built of huge syringes of Pfizer injections. So she'd saved all the empty syringes and made a chandelier and called it the light of hope. And this woman who I know, who was like years, like the stereotypical outsider, when, started out against Thatcher back in the 80s and all this stuff, would posted that as it was isn't this beautiful? And has fallen completely under the hex and the spell, to the point now where anyone who questions anything, including me, who used to be her friend, is a far-right extremist and stuff like that for not wanting to get this thing inside me. It's, yes, I can't deal with it. I can't deal with I can deal with it. I'm dealing with it somehow, but I can't get my head around the transformation in personalities. This is what disturbs me the most. It's like there's people I've known for years, and I want to say, where the fuck did you go? Where are you now? Who are you? What are you? It's just like the Donald Sutherland film Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It really is. Sorry, Jason.
Yeah. Oh, no, I was just, same thing, just caveat off of that. It really is like, yes, there's the head cold. And if you want to say there's a virus, the virus is some sort of mental, spiritual virus, like Thomas was saying, that it's a hex, that it really is changing the fundamental operating system of how we define being human. And I like Cliff High's latest video that he just put out on BitChute about this. He calls it the bug, and he does a really cool linguistic breakdown of it. But off of that, it is as if the people who have been needle crafted, either just with the one J&J one or the other ones that take multiple ones, it's like, yeah, they've turned into entirely different people, and marriages have been ended over it, mine to be included. And that it's just, it's hard to recognize the world that we even live in anymore. I went and got coffee before the show this morning and nearly got kicked out of Starbucks for not having a face diaper on. And it's just, the world we live in now has been turned upside down. And it is if the minds and the consciousness of humankind as a whole has been sectioned off, and they're still part of like the organic original way of doing things. And then there's this other psycho-spiritual virus that is trying to consume all sentient life on the planet, or all thinking life on the planet, any life that has a complex vagus nervous system capable of having more than just a hive mind experience, is what it seems like. It's as if whatever this is trying to just take out the individuality of what it means to be a human being and turn people into a collective, like a collective hive mind, almost like the Borg from Star Trek, where it's just, groupthink, no individual thought anymore. People will call it communism, but I think communism is just another symptom of this greater mental spiritual virus. It's probably existed for a long time, but now it's just like Thomas, you're saying, invasion of the body snatchers. It's like we may have seen scouts and forward operating troops as sleepers for the last couple centuries, but now it's like the stormtroopers and the tip of the spear of the invasion is beginning. And, it's coming through in waves now, even though there's not fucking UFOs coming out of the sky or anything. It's like they're slipping between dimensions, that we can't necessarily see it, these entities out there. But it's as if I don't know if you guys have seen this, it's as if sometimes there are certain people out there that have been switched out. It's like the same body walking around, but there's something else operating that body. And whether that's the operating system that's been installed, or who knows what, is if it's an actual extra dimensional life form, some sort of entity, there's something else taking over.
I'm totally open to all that. I really am. And I never thought I ever would be. In fact, I would have been the kind of guy who would read about David Icke as a reptilians and said, no way. But now I tell you now, I'm not so much now. I'm not saying it is that or anything, but I'm a lot more open-minded to that kind of thing about another species, behind it. Now, I don't want to end on a very negative note, but I will say this, when you hear me talk about a parallel society and a parallel culture, what I call the tribe, and it's just a name for people who say see through this mirage. I really do believe it's a force. I'm seeing it all the time. Every weekend I meet with people from all over Ireland who are now totally, the point, it's like this, Greg and Jason. There's a point when you're in a marriage, a relationship, a friendship, or a job where you say, it's never going to fucking work, okay? I have to go. I now feel that way to the bulk of the human race. And you know what? It doesn't bother me, because I know we can create a parallel society within this one where it'll be a hell of a lot better than what the globalists are offering. How do you feel about that, Greg?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The question is whether we can do that within this kind of bubble of reality that we are in, because if you're seen to be doing something, different, then that indicates to others that there is an alternative. So you cannot be allowed to be seen to be doing this, if you see what I mean. So it's not so much that a parallel society, parallel reality would be a problem for, the fat controllers as such, but if we're visible, that's a problem, So that's where I see the challenges going forward.
Yeah, that's why I've said the best way to do it would be a collective of consciousness and associations. I don't want any formal agreements or any kind of the People's Party of the breakaway non-vaxxers or any of this crap. I don't want any of that. I want my attitude is find the others, as Terence McKenna said. And, I have a friend here in Ireland who says, well, the solutions will manifest themselves in time. Yeah, I believe that. I'm down with that. I think that can happen. I just think now we're in a very dark period, but we will get out of it. And it'll be because of people like us and dialogues like this. I really do believe that. And because of Legalise Freedom. Now, and that's we'll run the text underneath the whole screen while you're on. It's Legalise with an S, the UK way, not Legalise with a Z or a Z, the American way. Freedom.
Well, actually, I own both those domains, so you can spell it either way. I anticipated this confusion early on. I thought I'm just going to buy them both.
Good idea. So anything else you want to say, Jason, before we wrap up? Greg?
Well, as Thomas, like you're saying, it's as if we're going through a boot camp right now for training, and I'm glad to have drill instructors and officers like yourself, Thomas, and like you, Greg. There's some really great mentors here, and I've just been real happy to be here on the show with both of you today.
And Greg, anything you want to wrap up? Anything you want to tell us about? Do you have any other plans beyond Legalise Freedom or anything like that?
Not as such at the minute. I've turned my focus ever more to that, actually. So, and I'm looking at spending more time rather than less on legalisefreedom.com. But as you say, that the links for the site will be below for people who want to check it out. But no, we're on as I said before, we've incarnated here for a reason. And if things get sticky and difficult, that's telling us something more profound, not less. This life isn't about being happy and having stuff. But that's what we're told, but it's not. We're here to learn something. And boy, are we doing that at the minute.
Yep. And, the old adage, knowledge is power, it's true. I mean, it really is true. I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but it's true. I want to thank Greg Moffitt for coming on the show. We'll have you on again. We will. And Jason for there and over in the US, and the rest of you for tuning in. Like, knowledge is power. And if you go over to legalisefreedom.com and subscribe to the absolute massive archive of interviews there. And this is the kind of thing that's preparing us. Every little bit of, every seed you can absorb from someone else's mind regarding how we'll survive this thing is a seed that can actually save your life. So I'm a very big believer in that. And it's an absolute, what's 40 euros a year or something? It's really inexpensive for like a massive amount of stuff. So get over there wherever you live and subscribe to that, and get involved, get listening, get knowledge, get empowered. And thanks, Greg, thanks, Jason, and thanks everybody at home. And we'll see you all at the next Beyond Room 313 Symposium.